why these things exist, and the things that we do that don't seem to be a big deal can make a big deal in communities. And look at the history of redlining in San Diego, for example, and where the freeways are and where they were purposefully put. There's a reason that Chicano Park has pillars in it that they painted, because it's the Coronado Bridge, and there's a reason why that's there. And you start really digging into these things, and you can understand why people are mad. Like yesterday was the 99th year Tulsa riots. And if you haven't heard about it, look it up. It was basically, people referred to as Black Wall Street. It was a vibrant Black community in Tulsa. If you've seen the HBO series Watchmen, they highlighted an episode where white people came in and murdered and blew up and destroyed this entire community. And there's history of this time and time again that we typically gloss over when we talk about this thing. We feel like it's only happened since the 1960s, but this has been going on for a while. My perspective is we need to do a better job of engaging our communities of color, especially the Black community, and really asking them and listening. They're not there to teach us because they don't have the time or the energy to teach us about it. But listening to their stories will lead you to the resources to start having those conversations with your friends. And it's going to be uncomfortable, and it's going to push you to think about things in new perspectives. Like, think about the 1980s and cop shows. Who is the police and who are the perps? And really look at the story that we've been ingrained to see through no fault of our own in some instances. But we need to start looking at how we center things we see and start centering them not around us, but around others. And with that, I would, hope you find a Black business to support, find a Black author to read. There's Twitter feeds galore now of, here are the people who are doing it, who don't normally get the eye put on them. Let's put an eye on them. Let's lift their voices up, and then be willing to engage in some place that I'm sure you're going to feel uncomfortable. I do as well.
Definitely. And, I know you mentioned that it's hard to see more people either upset or confused about the anger and not about what happened that's causing some of this anger. I know on social media, there's a lot of people trying to present representations of where this anger is coming from, what has happened. One of the things that sort of hit me when I just watched it, and it has a lot to do because I was a huge fan of Tupac as a youth. And there's this video of him. I have no idea where the video is from, to credit it or anything like that. I wish I could. And we usually play it safe here on our podcast. I don't know what's going to happen. I want to play this clip on here really quick, just so you can, if you haven't got a chance to hear it, you could hear what Tupac said. Hopefully this will work. And then we can talk a little bit about this.
Every day, I'm standing outside trying to sing my way in. You know what I'm saying? We are hungry, please let us in. We are hungry, please let us in. After about a week, that song is going to change to, we hungry, we need some food. After 2-3 weeks, it's like, give me all the food, breaking out the door. And after a year, you just like, you know what I'm saying? I'm picking the lock, coming through the door, blasting, you know what I'm saying? It's like you hungry, you reached your level, you don't want any more. We asked 10 years ago. We was asking with the Panthers. We was asking with them, with civil rights movement. We was asking. Now those people that were asking, they're all dead and in jail. So now what do you think we're going to do? And we shouldn't be angry. And my raps that I'm rapping to my community shouldn't be filled with rage. You know what I'm saying? They shouldn't be filled with the same atrocities that they gave to me. In the media, they don't talk about it. So in my raps, I have to talk about it. And it just seems foreign because there's no one else talking about it.
Right.
So, I mean, that was from Tupac, and that was years ago. That was, I don't remember how long ago he was murdered in Las Vegas. I believe it was like 96. But so that's years ago. So, to look at that time point then, and we're now 20 something years past that. I'm not trying to say all this violence that we've been seeing is okay, because some of it, again, is people just taking advantage of a situation. People just seeing, hey, people are going to start protesting, rioting. Let's go grab stuff from Target or mom and pop stores. Let's burn down the mom and pop stores who unfortunately have nothing to do with a lot of stuff. A lot of the mom and pop stores are people that are in similar situations in similar neighborhoods. But to know, I mean, that for me was a good example of this, where this anger is coming from. I mean, what was it? 4 or 5 years ago, people were upset about a Colin Kaepernick for kneeling during the national anthem, saying it was offensive and whatnot. That was peaceful protest for what we have seen this past couple of weeks, right? That was what his protests were about. That's why he was kneeling, is because of police brutality, murders of unarmed black men at the hands of police. And people were upset about it. Now we're flash forward to where we are today, and people are asking for peaceful protests. Well, people were trying to protest peacefully. They've been trying to protest peacefully, and it wasn't being accepted. And it took something like this to sort of light a fire, ignite the flames. And now we've gotten to a point where people are paying attention now, I guess, is what we can say. And it's a bunch of people are paying attention. It sucks that it took what happened for this to happen now, with people actually trying to voice for equality, or voice for I can't even think of the right words for it. Dylan, I'm going to jump to you right now. Was the Tupac conversation, I mean, that sort of helps explain for people that can't quite understand why there's anger at this point, right? I mean, it's, we tried to be peaceful, you weren't listening, so now we have to just be angry.
Yeah. I mean, the man was a genius, and it's such a great explanation of how we've arrived to this point. And it's, if you don't want to listen to what Tupac had to say, and you want to ignore what's going on, then you're going to ignore what's going on forever, and you're complicit in this. And honestly, those people probably aren't listening to this episode. They probably either stopped listening immediately, or they're definitely done now. But yeah, I mean, Orange County is a very privileged, very sheltered place, right? We talk about the orange curtain existing and how we live in a bubble that's very sheltered, especially places like Irvine, where the club plays and where the club is based. It's very sheltered. They have a massive police force, and it's one of the safest cities in America, and there's not a lot of violent crime. It's mostly property crime, and that's because it's an affluent area. We have this bubble. We're sheltered away from it. I get why it happens. It doesn't excuse it. Now's the time to acknowledge that. Now's the time to support the people whose voice really needs to be heard. And you can be against property destruction, right? You can say that businesses don't deserve to be looted, but that's not as important as people should not die over a $20 bill. People should not die over a $1.79 bottle of orange juice, which is Latasha Harris in LA in 92. People should not die for, there should not be extrajudicial killings in the streets or anywhere else for that matter. That's why people are angry. That's what finally broke the straw back.
And I think it's taken, there's been a lot of, I don't have any direct quotes, but I've read a lot of stuff where people are discussing it. And I want to say there was even a celebrity, if you can think of the name, let me know, is basically saying this has been going on, since the 60s. It's just now people have easy ways to record this stuff that's going on. So that's why it seems like we're seeing it more frequently now. We're seeing videos more frequently of what's happening, but it doesn't mean that it's just now sort of come back, that we were good for 30, 40 years. It's just, back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s, you didn't have iPhones, all these easily accessible video recorders that you could just pull out of your pocket and just with a click of a button start recording. I mean, back in the days, you had to bring out a VHS recorder that you had to like load the tape, get it up, turn it on, push play. And by the time you do that, good chance you're going to miss it. I mean, an example of not missing it was like Rodney King. The example, that was one of the first times you saw, a civilian taking a video recording of some brutality going on against a human being. And yeah, Alan, let me throw it to you because I'm just going to get jumbled in my words if I keep speaking right now.
Ooh. Yeah, there's some things I also want to point out on. There's a gentleman by the name of Samson Yangwei, and he is he's on Twitter at Samsway, and his pinned tweet is basically he did some. He's a data scientist, political analyst, went to Stanford. He's co-founder of Campaign Zero, but his pinned tweet is research-based solutions to stop police violence. And if you want, I would suggest taking a look at it because he goes through implicit bias. He goes through police use of force laws with his use of force project. There's stuff in there about police union contracts, stuff in investment in alternatives to police as crime prevention. And there's like tons of things about mental health and creating other numbers besides the police you can call for mental health. I would suggest giving, some time to that. And just some other statistics that have been coming out have been mind blowing. Like 1/3 of Americans killed by strangers are killed by. There needs to be a re-look at how we do lots of things in the United States. Education, policing, jails. There's a lot of things that we need to relook at and see if there's a better way to do it, because where we are is not working for everyone. And we need to, if there was, I think it's DeRay McKesson says, systems were created by humans so they can be changed by humans. Know that whatever has been created by us can be changed and taken away and replaced by us. If you look at how the country was founded is by people saying this isn't working, we need a new system. And we need to take this time to relook at a lot of those things, how we run our economy, how we look after the person who needs the most. When we're looking at communities, how are we setting up our communities? Are we invested in our communities? And that doesn't mean that everything now is terrible and it's broken. It just means let's start really looking and designing for the next 100 years what we want America to look like. And start by taking a look at what is best for everyone, not just what is best for me. Because if it's best for everyone, it'll be best for me. It's kind of what the USLPA was saying. Like, we're looking at what's best for soccer, and what's best for soccer will be what's best for the players. And we need to relook at how we do some things. And Jane Elliott once asked if you don't know her, look her up too. She said, if you're white in this audience, raise your hand if you want to move through this world as a black person. Like, you want to be treated like a black person is treated. And no one raised their hand. And they said, look, you already know things are wrong. So what are we going to do about it? Like, what can we do in our small circle? It doesn't mean we all need to be protesting or we all need to be doing X, Y, Z. Like, you find your lane and you try to make something better. And if that means you engage your friend and have a real honest discussion about race and white privilege and white supremacy culture, not supremacist, supremacy culture, you start having these conversations. That's your lane. If your lane is protesting and being out in the front line, that's your lane. If your lane is, I'm fortunate, I'm going to donate to these businesses and these community members, then that's your lane. Like, find your lane and like do it. But now is not the time to wait. Our community members, our friends, our family, the people who stand next to us cheering on our teams, they need our help. And they need us to step up into a space that maybe isn't comfortable for us. So we'll all hold each other accountable. And we need to make sure that we're not waiting on someone else to fill that space that's needed, that conversation with a friend. But make sure we also take a step back and make sure we're also lifting up voices that need to be heard. Like, we don't all need to be taking up space. Like, sometimes the best thing to do is just to sit and listen.
Yeah. Now, some difficult stuff. There's some difficult things going on, right? Because there's some very dedicated people on both sides of this, which it gets hard because I think I can speak for all three of us. We're on the side for we want equality, um, we want justice for this, we want change, um, we want our fellow neighbors, our fellow Americans to be able to walk down the street, regardless of their race, their gender, their identity, and not have to look over shoulders, not have to fear that something can happen if they do something different, right? That's sort of this one of the big things going on with this Black Lives Matters movement is, unfortunately, Black people have to walk down the street in fear that if they say something wrong, if they do something wrong, if they look the wrong way, and the police are coming by, they're going to be the ones that are going to be targeted. I was watching a clip again. I don't know where I saw it. I believe it was like the Fox 11 News or something like that, with some people protecting a liquor store, or guarding a liquor store from protesters. The news camera, the news crews there recording, and they're all trying to flag down cops because there were some looters trying to come in. Cops circle around, come in, and what do? They head right to the closest Black people by this liquor store, even though these people that they went to were the people actually trying to protect the liquor store, defend the liquor store from the actual looters. And even the news crew was trying to tell the cops what was going on. And I want to say it took at least a minute or so for the cops to even start listening to the news crew and the people. And again, this is where this is coming from, is this just sort of immediate, I don't know, do call it bias, or this immediate just judgment by police officers that there's a call for police, there's a Black person, that must be the person that is causing the disturbance, or that's the reason why we need to do that. Which, again, I can't relate to that feeling as a person. I've never once been judged by law enforcement based off of what I was looking, what I was doing, how I was acting. So I cannot feel that part of what's going on, but I can understand, I can comprehend, I can look at that and say, that is not right. That's not the way it should be. But again, that's the way it is. And that's, I think, again, that's why a lot of people are looking at this situation now, and people of all races, genders, creeds, whatnot, are now seeing this, and now they're using how they are comfortable to express their frustration over this. Dylan actually heading out to the protests, and actually providing great coverage of some of these protests. I know if you don't follow his feed, when he was in Orange this past weekend, he was basically giving a play-by-play of what was going on as he was there, which was really cool. And it was a great way for some of us to feel like we're in the front lines there and seeing or reading what's happening. Others, like the three of us, taking what's typically a fun, goofy, for the three of us, I think, a break from just everyday life, come on and talk about soccer and video games and any other random goofy thought we want to talk about. And instead dedicating an episode to this, because or who knows, maybe even more if things keep getting worse, because this is something that's impacting us all.
It's an important conversation to have.
It is an important conversation to have.
Where we like to ignore these problems existing right in front of us. So I think it's especially important here in Orange County. I think 2% of the Orange County population is Black. We're not a very diverse county in that sense. We can be better, and so it's up to us, the majority of us, the 98% of us that aren't that aren't Black, to amplify their voices and to acknowledge our own, like Ray said, acknowledge your own implicit biases about this, and be a better person. You know, you can apologize for who you've been, but much better than that, and much more importantly, let's just be better for our communities in the future. And that's why you support local. I just tweeted a list of local Black-owned businesses that you can support.
And thank you for that, Dylan. That was a good throw in there.
Sure. You know, if you don't feel comfortable going out and protesting, go and donate to a bail fund. You know, we've seen all across the country that people who are getting arrested aren't necessarily doing anything wrong. They are protesting. We see looters just getting away with it, basically, on the news.
And it's the protesters that are paying the price for what these looters are doing, right? It's
donate to a local bail fund. Find a local Black or minority charity to support, or a group to support. Lend what you have today so that tomorrow we can have something better and something equal. Because that is the best Orange County we could have, is an Orange County without kids in Newport Beach making swastikas out of red Solo cups at parties. It's an Orange County that is vibrant and diverse and loving. You know, it's not the gentrified part of Santa Ana. You know, it's the Centenaros that are there every day. And the work kind of goes unnoticed, but it's communities like that where everyone is together. And that's what we could have out of the 3 million people that live here. We could have a situation like that if we stand up for each other against really, really blatant injustices. And that's what we should do.
all right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to throw maybe a difficult question for the both of you. I'm not expecting that you have the perfect answer for this, but I'm sure we've all dealt with situations where you're either on social media or you're talking with friends and family, and they're on the polar opposite of sort of what we're talking about here. I'm just going to quote, and I'm not going to call out any names, but someone on Facebook that I follow posted, 2019, per the Washington Post, 41 unarmed people were killed by the police, 19 white, 9 Black, 6 Hispanic, 3 Asian, 4 other. And then saying it's not race, it's humanitarian. So using those stats to basically show, hey, if you look at that, more white people were killed than any other race by police. So, I mean, I guess you could say that's a true statement. That's a true fact that, I don't know if these stats are real, but if they are real, you could say that's true. But don't we have to take into account the distribution of race? You can't just say because 19 white people are killed, it's more than anyone else. So by all means, if you look at it, then it's white people that are being targeted. But lo and behold, there's probably a greater percentage of white people living whatever these numbers come from. What do we do when we're interacting with people like this? I mean, the easy thing to do is just ignore and just sort of, hey, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. But then how does that help the situation where we're trying to create cause or create change from what's happening? I don't know if either of you have dealt with this stuff at all, but what are some ideas, or what can we do when we're in these situations and we're dealing with people that are, I guess, want to say hard-headed with or biased with their facts? I don't know, Alan, I'll go to you first. Just, I mean, and if you don't have any thoughts on this, I mean, by all means, be honest.
I would make an argument that unarmed Black humans being murdered by police officers is just one small sliver of the things that we need to consider when talking about Black Lives Matter. That's like one portion. The other portion are things like, if you look at the government-backed home loans that were handed out during the New Deal, 98% of those, I believe, were given to white Americans. If you look at historically with the GI Bill sent hundreds of thousands of military personnel to college after World War II, but was not available for Black families or to historically Black colleges that would accept Black people in the 1940s and 50s. This goes well beyond just one sliver of grievance. So that's one part of it, and it's a real part of it. And things like you are more likely to be murdered, a Black person to be murdered by police in St. Louis than the murder rate of the United States, the average murder rate in the United States. Like, we can point out like one statistic and pull it apart, but if you look at everything lined up back to back to back to back to back, and the time frame in which a Black person could freely move about this country and to vote and to get home loans and to get business loans, it's systematic, and sometimes it isn't even purposeful. Sometimes it is accidental, but it's something that I think the best picture in my brain is the picture of a guy going to put his hand underneath the soap dispenser, and it works when it doesn't work because he's too dark, and then he puts a paper towel underneath and it works. Stuff like that, or racial or facial recognition software can determine two white people, but it has a hard time differentiating between Black faces. It's things like this that aren't necessarily purposeful or racist by intent, but they're racist in application. And those are the things that I would point out. It's murder by police is one small sliver of what representation is. It's a much bigger picture than just that. That's the touch point. That's the most visually, it's a thing that's the most like visually recognizable. Like when you're talking about redlining, I'd have to like pull up a map and teach you what redlining is and do all of this background versus showing you a guy kneeling on someone's neck for 9 minutes. Like that you get right away. And I think a lot of people do. And then the next step is being willing to have that conversation and do it in a way that brings them in and not attacks them for not knowing these things, because then you turn them off, but really trying to engage them and have a conversation about empathy. And if you put yourself into that position, how would we feel about that position? And then listening to our neighbors and our family members of our community. I don't like saying brothers and sisters because I think that's, I say friends or students at school, but our family in our community, and ask them and talk to them about their experience. When I was in middle school, I was home alone, and a guy jumped out from behind our yard, and someone called the police, and the police came to my house. I forgot to lock the front door, and I hear a knock at the door, and I turn the TV volume down to hear if it's someone I know from the neighborhood that I would answer or not. I hear my door open, and I hear, "This is the Moreno Valley Police Department. If someone is here, please make yourself known." And I said, "Hey, my name's Alan." I'm not visible to them yet. I'm behind a wall, and I say, "My name's Alan. I live here. This is my house." And I turned the corner, and there were two police officers with their gun drawn. And I would just pause to believe that the experience that I had from that moment on is different because I have the skin color I have, and it might have gone a lot different had I been a different skin color. And it's those things that I've been really pondering and thinking about those little interactions of, I don't have my driver's license on me and they let me go, versus would that have gone different if I looked different? And I would make the argument that it probably would have gone different. Maybe not as bad as a knee on my neck for 9 minutes, and it's those small things of when I get pulled over, if I turn around this corner, will the cops believe me that this is my house? Or will they think that I'm a kid in this house trying to rob it? And those in split second decisions is that inherent bias of a police officer who might not be actively thinking that, but that might be their first reaction. And we need to make sure that people are aware of those things and can act against it, and just be aware that we make decisions. Like if I asked you, would you prefer an escalator or an elevator? You have a instant reaction like that one. And we have these instant reactions all the time. It's just recognizing when they are a benign reaction, like elevator to escalator, or they're an actual consequence that could affect somebody's life. And I would encourage you to look into implicit bias, and kind of read about it, and to have conversations with people about it, because I think it's healthy to do that. And I think we've been waiting too long to have those conversations.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really add too much to that anecdote or the idea that we need to address our biases. I've already said that. If you want some statistic background of this, I wrote a thesis a couple of years ago on mass incarceration, specifically as it pertains to the Black and Hispanic community in this country. So the United States has a quarter of the world's incarcerated population, which is it's 2.2 million Americans are incarcerated. 59% of those are Black or Hispanic people. Black and Hispanic groups make up 28.5% of the U.S. population. So there is a massive disparity there, where they are overrepresented for the population, and they are targeted at a much higher rate. That is statistically true because we have this overrepresentation of them in prison, for varying crimes. And that's not counting generally how those crimes are punished when they are punished. It's a serious issue that we need to change, right? We can't change it from the top down. This needs to come from the bottom up. This is why these grassroots movements, this is why these community protests are so powerful and so important. And it's so important to get involved in your community to make a positive difference. If you don't think that the DA is doing a good job of prosecuting local police if they are making mistakes or when they are making mistakes, and that they are coming down too hard on minority communities when they make mistakes, then you should vote for a new DA. If you think your sheriff is doing a poor job of policing your area, then you should find a new sheriff. And I challenge you to find one that actually represents what you want, and represents the good. Not just one that's not the incumbent, not just one that happens to have the letter of the party that you subscribe to next to it, but one that like is going to make a difference in your community. Not someone that's been around in local government for 30 years. Not someone that's looking to use local government as a stepping stone to a state rep position or a Senate seat someday, but find people or do it yourself to make your community better. And recognize your biases in the meantime, because if there's a good chance that if you're listening to this podcast, you might not be a person of color. Podcasts are very white. I mean, look at present company, as is lower division soccer in this country. But there is a very proud and very deserving community of people of color, both in podcast and lower division soccer, that deserve just as much support. They don't normally get it, right? You see a lot of groups just named Bara and then whatever is going to come after that. And I think that gets co-opted sometimes by some white supporters as well. But it's time to acknowledge that that's not our place. And it's fine if we're invited into those places. That is great. That is how communities mix and how communities blend. And that is something we should celebrate. But take a step back, because, you know, if you're white, this isn't about you. There are ways we can be better. And we've talked about that already on this episode. There are ways that we can be better. And there are ways that we should support our communities, the Black community, the Hispanic community, especially here in Orange County. Minority communities need our support. So we should support them, and we should let their voices be heard. And where we can, like this podcast, we need to use our voice and our platform and our privilege to elevate those voices so that we can achieve equality, so that we never have to have this conversation again. And it's not going to happen next week. And it's not going to happen next month. And it's not going to happen in November. Like, this is so heated right now, but this has been going on forever, right? We listened to Tupac say, this goes on, this goes on, this goes on. This was going on with the Panthers. This is going on in the early 90s. This has been going on 24 years since Tupac was killed. It's going to happen for a long time, and we need to do as much as we can to make sure that we get to equality as fast as possible. And then we can't take our foot off the gas then. We have to make sure that we don't regress at all.
Well said, Dylan. And I want to say well said to the stuff you've mentioned too, Alan. It was difficult. I've been stressing out all day because I knew basically we were going to jump into this episode and this was going to be what we're going to talk about. Maybe chance for talking about soccer stuff, but this is definitely the more important topic. So it's stressful because it's a difficult discussion to have. And this is just me, being who I am. It was just hard to try and come out here and be honest with what we're seeing, what's going on. I've been angry over the last week from images I'm seeing on the news, a post I'm seeing on social media. I don't want to now take that out and now be an angry person while talking to you guys while doing this podcast, because I feel like by having a really good, open, honest discussion about this and being acting the way we've acted on this, as far as just, trying to just share what's going on in our minds without trying to, we're not trying to sit here and sound angry and bash your head and say, you better listen to what I'm saying, or, or whatever. I mean, it's been a difficult week. And as much as I think we all would love to have sports to watch or talk about, to just sort of take us, give our mind a brief 30-minute rest of all the craziness going on. It's not something we can do right now. It's something where it's not time to rest. It's time to continue talking, continue supporting this cause. Yeah, Dylan, I know you unmuted yourself, so I assume you have something you want to throw in here.
Yeah, I mean, you said it's been a difficult week, and it has. It's probably been a really difficult week for all of us, but it's been a really difficult life. It's been a really difficult week every week for generations of minorities in this country. And why? Like, if you don't already, if you've somehow made it this far in the podcast, you don't already get that might not be okay, then you need to ask yourself why you think it's okay that people
Definitely
have to have a difficult week every week of their lives, that they get that much more stressed when I see a cop. It's not, am I going to get a speeding ticket? It's, am I going to be alive in half an hour? Am I going to be in jail later? We need to make it so no one has to do that.
Definitely.
Ask yourself why should other people have such a difficult week every week? And then realize that some of the pain that you might be feeling right now, when you see the damage that's happening in your community and the energy and the emotion of people in your community standing up and raising their fists and chanting names, that's every day for them. So
yeah,
get behind that.
And again, I'm being straight up honest. I'm being straight up honest. I've never been in that situation, so that's why I'm.
Yeah, I mean,
it's hard.
Look at me. I'm young. I live in a pretty affluent area.
Yeah,
and I have
it's
chiefly.
It's hard to relate.
Very white skin, so I will never know that pain. But I know.
But now's the time for us all to. Now's the time for all of us to maybe do our research, or there's a lot of people, that are recommending things to read to sort of get at least a better understanding of this. You're not going to be able to now say, hey, I've walked in your shoes from reading a book, but it's going to give you a better idea of why we are where we are, and how it's gotten to this point. And again, for me, one of the most simple things was just listening to that 1 minute Tupac interview. I'm sure there's more on that, but just that 1 minute of words really puts it in perspective of why there's anger. All this stuff that's going on now, thinking about stuff I've never thought about in the past. Like, you always see like a black person running from the police, or in a high-speed car chase running from police. And you're like, well, if they would just stop it's going to get worse if you don't stop. Well, that might not, now you're thinking about it, that might not be true. It could be worse because you're stopping. And I'm not saying that would always happen, but that's now I'm looking at it and I'm like, that's what's going to go through someone's head when this is the type of stuff that's happening. And the fact that what sort of sparked this current outrage was caught on video. And the fact that as far as we can all tell, the officers knew they were being recorded on video and it's still happening. It really opens up your mind to think I sort of get now why certain people react certain ways to certain situations, where I would justify if a cop tells me to stop or pull over or raise your hands. Hey, I'm going to stop, pull over, raise my hands. But not everyone has that comfort in that situation, which I'm sort of upset. I'd never realized that in the past, but things that we're seeing now is opening that up, opening my eyes up for that as well, at least. Alan, do you have anything else you want to say on this, or should we maybe start to wrap things really quick here?
I think we've kind of taken up enough space tonight. And I think it's our turn to kind of step back and individually maybe do some reflecting of our own, and taking a moment to read something or listen to something or whatever we need to do to connect, to listen, to kind of turn some stuff off and kind of recharge ourselves with knowledge and strength to have some of these discussions some more.
Thank you. So we typically end things out with a random thought. I'm just gonna say, let's give us each a chance to just say a last word. I'm not even gonna preference it with any kind of joke. So Dylan, I'll go to you first.
I've already recommended this piece before, but Recessitif by Toni Morrison. Anything you can get your hands on by Toni Morrison. That's not the name of work. Literally anything she wrote, go and read it. Black women especially are prejudiced against because not only of the color of their skin, but their status as women. She was an incredible author. America is a little bit worse off for wear without her, but she left such a great body of work behind, and you can learn so much about, I think, the Black and the Black female experience in this country by reading her work. And I think that is a good place to start.
Alan, what about you?
I'm going to make a literature recommendation of The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. It was kind of one of the first books to kind of be eye-opening to a kind of a new way of thinking, and it kind of really was a challenging book for me to get through, but it was an important one. But if you're not into reading a pretty heavy book about mass incarceration, you can go to joincampaignzero.org and do some reading and research and possibly donating to a campaign to possibly end police violence.
Thank you, Alan. So most people know I'm a pretty big music fan, especially when it comes to like hip hop and stuff like that. So over the past week or so, I've been going back and listening to some of my all-time favorites. Some of the rappers and hip hop musicians that have sort of discussed the type of stuff we're talking about for years. So you look at, again, Tupac, we talked about him, Public Enemy, Chuck D, has always had a lot of stuff that they're mentioning. It's go back and, do do some research. Go on Google, check out some rappers, hip hop groups, maybe, to just sort of get a, if music's more your thing. I'm not a big reader, so if music's more your thing, go and just listen to what some of these musicians said. It doesn't just have to be hip hop. There's other genres of music. It's just I'm more of a hip hop person, so that's why I sort of flow to that side. But go back and there's a bunch. I mean, even you look at like Rage Against the Machine and a bunch of there's a bunch of music out there that helps you sort of understand, helps you feel the emotion of what could be going on. So if you're not a reader, if music's more your thing, you can look on there. I could go to all types of art. I'm sure there's some paintings you can go check out, some movies you can check out that also can help, just sort of help you understand, or at least give you an idea of the pain, the struggle, the hardship, and the difficulty that's causing a lot of this anger right now. So I think with that, we're going to go and wrap things up. We're just going to sort of end things right here. I'm not going to even ask my friends here for their social media. If you aren't following us by now, then I don't know why you're not, you're probably not going to follow us anyways. But I mean, if you need to, you can find us. We're not that difficult to find, or just listen to an old episode. Just fast forward to the very end and you can find out who we are. So for Dylan, for Alan, I'm Ray, and this is the Orange and Black SoccerCast. We're out.
You have been listening to the Orange and Black SoccerCast. For the latest Orange County SC news and information, visit our website, ocscpodcast.com. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Ruffneck Scarves, official scarf supplier to MLS, USL, and US Soccer. Get custom scarves for your group or team at ruffneckscarves.com.